I see some familiar faces, those who have already attended, and quite a few new faces. You're all analog products or outside? All analog. Is anyone from outside? Outside. Good. Okay. So let me introduce myself. I am Srinivas. I offered this paper almost for quite a few years. There have been some successes also, but very few, frankly speaking. One of the students directly from this institution, Richa Kulkarni, pre-COVID, I think 2019-20 batch. First time, she is a computer science graduate. She came to me when I was taking the demo. Immediately after the demo, she said, sir, I will take this. And she joined. And within 3 months, I realized that she is bound to make it. And my understanding was right. She made it. Very first attempt. Yes, sir. She had very wide, choice to make. But somehow, she got connected. And first attempt, she got 132. Subsequently, because first time when I met her, she was keen on getting into IFS, Foreign Service. That she couldn't make it. 132 rank, she couldn't make it. Second time, she improved. But by then, she changed her mind from IFS to IAS, and she became IAS. So that's what I mean to tell you is, this exam itself is very simple. But at the same time, it demands some level of commonsensical understanding. Why commonsensical? Because when you look at the syllabus, I don't know how many of you have gone through the syllabus. We have a syllabus which deals with 3 years of graduation. If you are a graduation student in political science, in first year you will have this basic concepts in political theory, followed by Indian government and politics. And finally you will have this comparative politics, then international politics, and finally India-centric international politics. This is how this paper is, 3 years. And here this paper, we try to understand it in a short span of say 4 months. So if you are trying to understand 3 years of syllabus into 4 months, that means definitely UPSC does not demand any in-depth understanding of the subject. So what it demands is a commonsensical understanding. So commonsensical understanding means where you can relate the concepts. That is how it. So that's the reason why UPSC preparation always demands not a depth in understanding, but wider in understanding. It is not vertical, it is horizontal. And that is the reason why you find, even with respect to general studies paper, you find quite a few questions overlapping. Overlapping is something very common. For example, you find questions, political questions, even in paper 1, history. GS paper 1, history, geography, you have certain questions. At least there will be 25 marks to 50 marks questions out of 250. Some way related to politics. And paper 2, it's completely politics. Paper 3, economy. All economic decisions in the present are political decisions. And that's the reason why you find many debates, public debates taking place whether to permit or not to permit freebies. Because freebies, we are not looking at it from the perspective of an economy. Freebies are examined from the perspective of political decision making, right? Identified as welfare to the people. So welfare is one of the primary objective of any political system, which it cannot ignore. So paper 3 also has overlapping of political decision making. And last paper, a recent addition to the preparation, ethics. Ethics in governance. Ethics is nothing but how you organize yourself. How you organize yourself in a society. Ethical way of life is nothing but an organized way of life. Because ethics is not governed by any law. Ethics is not governed by any law. Ethical way of life means where you remain free and at the same time you have an obligation towards the society. So ethical way of life, in fact, unites your enjoyment of freedom with the duties that you perform. So ethical way of life is a combination of enjoyment of rights and performance of duties combined together. That is an ethical way of life. So paper 4 in fact deals with that. So all this has some sort of a political interference. Without politics, probably your understanding will remain very rudimentary. Only when you start understanding from the political perspective, then only it happens. So after these 4 papers, even your general essay again you have 2 questions, 125 marks each. One question is based on some concept and the second part of the question in the application of the concept. One question is usually based on some idea, a conceptual idea. Second part of the essay is in the application of the idea. So among the 3 questions, you will find one political question. So politics is nothing but that something shapes your own existence consciously and unconsciously. Whether you are conscious or not, you are governed by certain way of life. That is politics. Within your home or outside your home. As long as you stay within your 4 walls, still you are governed by certain principles of politics. If you step out, you are again in a political society. So what this paper in fact deals with is, it tries to relate you, right, with 2 distinct entities. One in the public domain, we try to identify it as state, a larger entity, and the individual. This is politics. The relationship between the state, a larger entity, and a constituent part of the state, the individual. This relationship. Because individuals are not alone. We again are part of a community. So when we are part of a community, we try to identify it as a civil society. So politics is nothing but a relationship between political society and civil society. Why I am telling political society? Recently we had elections, right? Did we elect? We chose our representatives. So these representatives constitute our political society. The representatives who are elected constitute our political society. They are the ones who are authorized to make decisions on our behalf, right? But we are part of a civil society. Why we identify it as civil? Because we are part of an organized life. We are not part of an anarchic life. Lawlessness. We are part of an organized life. That is where we identify ourselves as part of civil society. Got it? So political society's relationship with civil society, how it evolved from ancient period to the present is what you understand in political science. Right? So individual is part of it. Individual is part of this civil society, and political society is represented by state. So this relationship, state and individual relationship, is what politics is. So what is the relationship that we have with the state? State is identified to make a law. State is identified to make rules which govern the society. Now, what is the constituent role of the individual? Why should I obey the rule? What is that I get by obeying the rule? This is how state and individual relationship is defined. Why should I obey the law of the land? Right? So why you obey the law of the land? Why you obey the rules enacted by the state? Because state provides you security. Security to your life. State provides you security to your freedom. By obeying the law of the land, you are in fact permitted to enjoy freedom. You can be free or enjoy freedom only when you are a law-abiding citizen. That means you are protected. Your freedom is protected. Your life is protected. You are permitted to lead a social life, a life which is part of a community. Social life means which is part of a cohabited life. Right? This is where all this is possible because you are part of a state. What if you are stateless? Think for a moment, what if you are a stateless individual? In the absence of state, what does prevail? What prevails if you are not part of a state? If you are not part of a state, that means you are part of a lawless society. That means you are not part of any legal authority. You are part of a community where there is no law, where anarchy prevails, lawlessness prevails. So in a lawless situation, what will happen? There is no security to your life. There is no security to your property. In a lawless situation, even in an imagination, there is no security to your life. There is no security to your property. There is no security to your freedom. And that is the reason it appears to be very natural to be part of a lawful society. Because law ensures, law guarantees protecting your life, protecting your freedom, protecting your property. So it is natural to be part of a collective which is again governed by law. This is state. So the relationship between state and individual is what part A of paper 1 deals with. The relationship between state and individual is what part A of the paper deals with. So it identified the relationship under certain identified features or concepts. So paper 1, part A highlights what a state would be. Because state also is not something which can be expressed in one single term. Because state, if you identify a state, it cannot be explained in one single term because it is interpreted. The state is the interpretation of state takes different dimensions. Different people followed the understanding of the state differently. So we have a liberal understanding of the state. We have a Marxist understanding of the state. We have a feminist understanding of the state. Liberal understanding means liberals always believe that state should always promote individual freedom and individual security. The basic purpose of the state is to promote and expand the freedom of the individual and the security of the individual. That's the reason why liberals always identified state as a neutral arbiter. Because two individuals who have conflicting interest, because it believes in primacy of the individual. Liberal state believes in the primacy of the individual. If individual is important, then no two individuals will have similar interest. You may be a religious man, I may be a non-religious man. We don't have shared interest. State as a neutral arbiter has to resolve the conflict without taking any side. That's the liberal understanding. Neutral arbiter means it does not have any interest. State will not side with religious man, or state will not side with a non-religious man. State will remain neutral. And it should resolve the dispute, conflict arising between two individuals. This is the idea of a liberal state. Secular. When I said state is neither siding with either of us, then it's a secular state. Secular means, what do you understand by secular? Secular means where state does not discriminate. Absence of discrimination is secular. If you have caste discrimination, you are unsecular. If you have religious discrimination, you are unsecular. If you have gender discrimination, you are unsecular. So state does not maintain any reservation, any discrimination. Then you identify it as a secular state. So liberal state identifies itself in resolving a conflict, because two individuals come with dissimilar interest. So it should safeguard the interest of both. Both are important as far as state is concerned. So state cannot remain only with the majority and ignore minority, or state will not remain only with the minority and ignore majority. You understand? So state does not discriminate. It remains neutral. But at the same time, it has the authority to resolve the dispute. So neutral arbiter. This is a liberal understanding. Right? But Marxists do not think so, because Marxism does not believe in individual primacy. Only liberals believe. Liberals believe in individual primacy. Marxism does not. But Marxism believes in community emancipation. Marxism is an ideology that believes in emancipating the labor, emancipating the worker. Emancipating means setting free the labor force in every society. Because that ideology believes labor are exploited. Labor are exploited because of the money power. So what is the ideology? It wanted to set the labor free from exploitation. So they argue that state is not a neutral arbiter. For Marxism, state is not neutral arbiter like liberals believe. Instead, Marxism believes state is a class state. State is a class state means state is only with the propertied class. State will only maintain and promote the interest of property owners. So propertyless are exploited because state is with property owners. State is controlled by the people who own property. Got it? So Marxism does not appreciate state as a neutral arbiter. It in fact recognizes that state is with the owners of the property. Those who have control over property, they control the state. And that is the reason why labor continues to be exploited. So if you want to set the labor free, the workers free, then state has to be abolished. So they have taken the extreme position. So they don't appreciate the state. They don't appreciate the state, so they take the extreme position of abolishing the state. Marxism. They think that labor can only be emancipated, set free, when the state is non-existent. So when will the state becomes non-existent? When you abolish private property. When there is no private property in society, that means there is no class division in society. If private property is not there, then there is no class, because everyone is same. Right? So when everyone is same, there is no need for state. Because state is necessary when property exists, when private property exists. So Marxism is not against property. Marxism is against ownership of private property. Marxism is not against property. It is against the ownership of private property. It argues that if you have private property, you need state to protect your private property. Because state comes with the power to punish those who try to occupy your property. The state can protect it. So state is not a neutral arbiter, but state supports those who control property. Marxism. So another extreme idea of state, not in the liberal tradition, is feminism. Feminists argue that state is again not a neutral arbiter, because state is a patriarchal state. State is a patriarchal state. Who controls the state? Only the men control the state. Men use the state to exploit the women in society. Men make laws to exploit women in society. The state is not neutral, as liberals believe. State is a patriarchal state. Because of the state, patriarchy continues in society. What is patriarchy? Hierarchy in society, where men occupy higher position in society. Women are occupying the secondary role in society. That is patriarchy. That means there is no equality in society. We are not part of an equal society, but we are part of a hierarchical society, where men and women are divided. And men are the ones who are active in public life. They are the ones who control the state. And that is the reason why, even after 75 years of independence, we have to enact a law in parliament to permit women with 33% reservation in the forthcoming elections, assuming 2029. So what was the need for this? What was the need for reserving the seats for women? That means we are not part of an equal society. We are part of a hierarchical society where men dominate women in public life. Right? Public life anna. Public life lo women unda. ఎంతమంది చంద్రబాబు నాయుడు మహిళలను మినిస్ట్రీ ఇచ్చాడు? నిన్నగాక మొన్న అయింది కదా, మంత్రివర్గం ఏర్పడ్డది కదా. మరి వీళ్ళు కూడా సపోర్ట్ చేస్తున్నారు కదా ప్యాట్రియార్కీకి అగెన్స్ట్. కానీ ఎంతమందికి ఇచ్చిండు? కనీసం 1/3కి ఇచ్చిండా? మా అంటే 4-5 మందికి ఇచ్చింటాడు, అంతే కదా. సో అకార్డింగ్ టు ది కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ your ministry cannot exceed 10% of the strength of assembly. 175 మంది ఉన్నారు అంటే దాదాపు ఇంక్లూడింగ్ ద చీఫ్ మినిస్టర్ యూ కెన్ హ్యావ్ 18. అంటే కనీసం 1/3 అంటే 6 మందికి ఇవ్వాలి. వాళ్ళ పాపులేషన్ 1/3 కాదు కదా, హాఫ్ ఉన్నారు అంటే 9 మందికి ఇవ్వాలి. 9 women should be accommodated in ministry. How many did Modi accommodate in his cabinet? How many? Nirmala Sitharaman and Annapurna, cabinet rank. Rest 1 or 2 minister of state. 81. He is the one who has brought this law in the parliament. So in practice, what is that you express in practice? When it comes to practice, you continue to remain a patriarchal state where men continue to dominate. You understand? So the feminists argue that this state is not meant for women. Historically, men have occupied key positions of power. And that is the reason why women continues to be exploited in society. So they are opposed to this liberal idea of state as a neutral arbiter. They don't accept state as neutral because state is not neutral. State is patriarchal. Another dimension of state which is not in liberal fashion is fascism. Fascist state. State is fascist. Fascist means fascism is an ideology which believes in intolerance. Fascism is an ideology which upholds the extreme form of nationalism. Extreme form of nationalism is fascism. Right? So extreme form means you are essentially intolerant. Intolerant towards the other. The other means, because the idea of nation is always identified with majority. Who is the other in a majoritarian nationalism? The minorities. So if you remain intolerant towards the minorities, like Hitler, who believed that Germans are the Aryans, the creators of civilization, and he thought Jews are the destroyers of civilization, and which resulted in genocide. Right? Similar examples you find even in European states. White supremacism. White supremacism means where whites consider themselves superior to the other race. Even in Israel, the ongoing conflict is something similar to this idea of racial superiority, where you consider yourself to be superior to other race. That's the reason why you find a movement in America, Black Lives Matters. It's an ongoing movement. This is not a movement that happened way back. An ongoing movement within America, which is trying to uphold that even black life matters. That means there is no equal relationship even in American society. American society is also promotes white supremacism. Right? So this is how state is perceived. That's the reason why I said the politics deals with this relationship of individual with the state. If the state is neutral arbiter, there is no problem. If state is truly a neutral arbiter, then there is no problem because state will safeguard the interest of each and every individual. So after state, we find the concept of justice. Right? Justice, what is justice? Justice means giving food to someone starving is justice. But giving food to someone who already had a biryani is not justice. If you go and have one biryani in Bawarchi, then if I offer you food, it is not justice. Justice is relative. Relative deprivation is justice. If someone is deprived of something, then providing him that or helping him to overcome the deprivation is justice. Got it? So justice is not one-dimensional. So justice is not something you can say that this is justice. No. It is always relative. Relative means it differs from situation to situation. It is not something fixed. It changes according to the situation. And that's the reason why we try to identify justice as fairness. What is justice? What is justice means? Justice which is fair is justice. So what is the duty of the state here? If justice does not prevail in society, then state has to create justice. State has to create just conditions for a realization of justice. State has to create just conditions for the realization of justice. If justice is not realized in society, because the justice is not realized in state, justice has to be realized in society. Unequal relationship exists in society. So this unequal relationship have to be overcome. So state has to intervene. So through state intervention, equal relationship have to be established in society. That is where justice is. Got it? So justice can be also in different forms: social justice, economic justice, and political justice. Understood? Then equality. No one is born equal. We are all different. Some may be tall, some may be short, some may be fat, some may be lean, some may be men, some are women. We are not equal. No one is perfectly equal, but we can be treated equal. We are not perfectly equal, but we can be treated equal. So we need state to treat us equal. So when state gives you reservation, right, it is not looking at whether you are short, you are tall. It is treating everyone equal. Right? So equality is again realized only through state and individual relationship. Because state alone can treat everyone equal. If society treats everyone equal, then well and good. When society fails to treat everyone equal, then state will interfere. State will interfere through reservations to make everyone equal. Right? Like Parliament enacting a law reserving 33% of the constituencies for women to be represented. Because society failed to treat women and men equal. When society failed to treat men and women equal, then state had to intervene. So we have equality. Another concept that the state and individual is rights. Because if you don't have rights, then you cannot enjoy your freedom. Rights guarantee freedom. That's the reason why Harold J. Lasky argues a state is known by the rights it maintains. Higher the number of rights the individual has, here the democracy that prevails. That means state is less authoritarian if you have more rights. Lesser the rights, more authoritarian the state is. So if you want to truly enjoy your freedom, you need more and more rights. If you have less rights, then you cannot enjoy your freedom. So the guaranteeing of rights to the citizens helps in preventing an authoritarian state. And Hannah Arendt, one of the Western thinker, she is also part of our syllabus. She was a refugee, because refugee means where you become stateless. She in fact goes a step further. Because of her own refugee status, she in fact goes a step further and demands right to have rights. So that state cannot take away the rights. If you have right to have rights, the state cannot take away your rights. That is the reason why it is argued that rights should originate in society. Rights should come from society. State will only have to maintain them. If state gives you rights, it can always take away the rights. If state gives you rights, it can take away the right because state wants to take more power. If rights originate in society, then state is forced to maintain it. If rights do not originate in society, state will take away the rights. You got it? So rights help in enjoying the individual freedom. Higher the rights, higher the individual freedom. Lesser the rights, lesser the freedom. That means if you have less rights, like in China, North Korea, more authoritarian the state is. More rights, like in America, less authoritarian the state is. For example, in America, during the peak of the pandemic, if you don't want to wear mask, you cannot be forced. State cannot force you to wear mask. It's your freedom, whether to wear a mask or not. State cannot dictate terms. State cannot penalize you. But in India, if you don't wear mask and step out, you can be penalized. That means our freedoms are not absolute. Our freedoms have come with restrictions imposed. Whereas in America, no restriction. Freedoms are absolute. State cannot interfere. State cannot interfere with your freedoms. You understand? So the more the freedoms, less the authoritarian the state is. Less the rights, more authoritarian the state is. Got it? So after rights, we have this idea of power, authority, hegemony, legitimacy. What is that we do with power? Power comes with two dimensions. A power which dominates, a power which develops, which helps in human development. So one is a productive power, the other is a dominating power. Mostly the power in politics is used with respect to the first dimension, domination. Power is mostly used in negative sense, to dominate, not in positive sense. Power extracts obedience because it is forcing you to do things which you otherwise do not willingly do. Power will force you to act in such a way which otherwise you wish not to do. So you find this idea of dominance as an undercurrent of power. But power also has another dimension. This is something recognized in the writings of Antonio Gramsci and Hannah Arendt. They argue power is not something that is identified with domination, but power which helps in production, a reformative power. So Hannah argues that power is not with an individual. No individual can hold power. Power is only in a group. For example, if you have a grievance, if you go and protest at the Indira Park crossroads, what will happen? You are pulled out. But if a group protests, you are heard. Because there is a power. A power there and then generates, which helps in resolving your dispute, your grievance. Individual does not have this power. This productive power or reformative power is only part of a group. When there is a group, you find power. For example, salt satyagraha. Salt satyagraha was successful. Why? Because salt satyagraha or Dandi March, right, succeeded in mobilizing the people. So it was a mass satyagraha, not individual satyagraha. So wherever there is a group participation, a power generates. And this power you cannot even store. The power remains as long as the group remains. If the group disperse, power vanish. But this power helps in addressing your grievance. So Hannah identified power positively. She is not looking at this idea of power negatively. Even Gramsci used this idea of power in terms of power of ideas, which he identified as hegemony. Right? For example, America is the only country in the 21st century to have waged war in two fronts simultaneously. A war against Afghanistan and a war against Iraq simultaneously. That's the only country in the world till date. But when it has taken a unilateral decision to wage a war against America, against Afghanistan and Iraq, none of us protested it. Did we protest it? Did we oppose? In fact, we supported it. Because America has consciously constructed an idea of global war on terror. What America said? This is Operation Enduring Freedom. I am taking this initiative to make the world free of terror. But in fact, what America was trying to do is preserve and protect its own self-interest. But how did it represent it? It represented these two wars as global war on terror and argued that the world will be safe after the end of these two wars. Operation Enduring Freedom. So the world will be ridden of terror. This is the idea America promoted, so we accepted it. This is hegemony. This is hegemony. That means the power of ideas which make others also believe what you say is right. The power of ideas which make others also make you believe that what you said is right. Same thing if you cannot apply to Russia today. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is no different. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is no different from America's invasion of Iraq. But the global community supported America. Global community condemned Russia. Both events are not different. America's invasion of Iraq is similar to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There is no difference. But one is appreciated by the global community because of the power of ideas. The power of ideas to create a favorable atmosphere is hegemony. The power of ideas to create a favorable environment is hegemony. And Russia's Ukraine war does not have any of these ideas representing. So we identify Russia's war on Ukraine as a self-interest war. Here, global interest. America tried to realize its own self-interest in its invasion of Iraq, but it projected it as a global interest. So this is where you create a hegemony. Hegemony means the power of ideas to create a favorable atmosphere. That is the reason why no one questioned American intervention. In fact, we all supported, clapped. We said, oh, wonderful, do that. But when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we are equally, indifferent. Because we don't look it as a global common good. Global common good, because Russia failed to create that hegemony, power of ideas. had Russia succeeded in creating a hegemony, then probably would have also appreciated. Same thing we identify in Israel. International global community is against Israel's war in Gaza. But Israel remains adamant. It remains adamant, right? Because it has also created a alternate hegemonic idea, stating that until unless Hamas is completely eliminated, there is no security to the region. There is no security to the region. So this is how you try to create a hegemonic dominance. Hegemony is something that is constructed through the power of ideas, where you try to identify yourself in trying to promote a collective good or a global common good, which is appreciated. Got it? So hegemony, power, authority, legitimacy, they are all identified in terms of this relationship between state and individual. And finally, we have ideologies, because every state is represented by a particular ideology. And I gave you a brief introduction what a liberal ideology stands for. Liberal ideology always stands for individual, primacy of the individual. Liberalism believes in the freedom of the individual. So liberalism always believes in a minimalist state, minimum state. It does not want a state which is very dominating, a minimum state. That is the liberal idea of state. Minimum state and a neutral state, neutral orbital. Beyond that, they don't accept any state interference. So liberalism does not appreciate state interference into society or economy. State has to play a very minimal role. What is that minimal role? Protect you from external aggression, maintain internal law and order. That's all. Beyond that, you don't expect state to interfere either into economy or into society. Liberal. So liberal ideology. But parallel to this, we have different ideologies like socialism, Marxism, feminism, fascism, right? Trying to uphold. Because among this, feminism is anti-liberal because it does not appreciate the liberal state, even though it is an offshoot of liberalism. They want the emancipation of women to be emancipated. Marxism, it believes in class war. It's a class state, class war which result in a classless society. Marxism ideology. Similarly, what we find is fascism, community. Fascism believes in the superiority of the community. That's the reason why it takes this extreme forms of nationalism. So all these are ideologies, right? So all these ideologies have in fact resulted in some thinkers, Indian thought and Western thought. As part of Indian thought, we have the ancient Indian thought identified in terms of this Dharma Shastra, Artha Shastra and Buddhist tradition. And subsequently, we find a very vast gap in terms of chronology. After Buddha, probably you don't find any major idea. That's the reason why Indian thought re-emerged only after the Sipahi Mutiny 1857. So until then, probably we never identified ourselves with this idea of freedom. So only anti-colonial struggle resulted in the rise of modern Indian thought. So modern Indian thought is centered around this colonial struggle. So within that we had two traditions. One tradition representing revival of the Hindu religious tradition, identified as Hindu Renaissance or Indian Renaissance, represented by Aurobindo, subsequently advanced in the writings of Mahatma Gandhi. So basic difference between these two traditions is this Indian Hindu Renaissance believed in independence first, reforms next. They wanted political independence first, social reforms. The other school believed in independent reforms first, independence next. The second school, which is represented by B.R. Ambedkar, they believed in reforms first, independence next. Because their argument was, if you don't find political independence, right, without social reforms, it hardly makes any difference. A white rule will be replaced by a brown rule. So what we want is first social equality, then political independence. So this is something that is represented starting from Ram Mohan Roy. This school has its roots in Ram Mohan Roy to B.R. Ambedkar, who believed in reforms first, independence next. But the dominant tradition was independence first, reforms next. So the moderates are identified with reforms first, independence next. Moderates, which culminated in Ambedkar. The extremists believed in independence first, reforms next. But the majority were the second stream. The majority of them were the second stream. That's the reason why we only acquired independence without any social reforms. Hierarchies continue to dominate our society even today, because honor killing persists in society. If honor killing persists, means our society is not equal society. Right? So what succeeded in independence is the idea of independence first, reforms next. But what we wanted is reforms first, independence. This is the modern Indian thought, divided into two schools. Similarly, we had Western thought. Western thought originated in Greek, again in terms of the state and individual. But Greek thought was primarily dominated by ethical way of life. How to promote a qualitatively good life, ethical way of life, Greek thought. But only with the advent of European Enlightenment or European industrialization, you find thought emerging in Great Britain, starting with Thomas Hobbes, who developed a thrust towards individuality. It is not an ethical way of life, but individual occupying center stage and giving the freedom to the individual to succeed in life. This is the genesis of liberal thought in post-enlightenment, starting with Thomas Hobbes. So Hobbes to Marx is identified as the modern era, where the focus is on individuality, where individual should be allowed to pursue his own life, where individual should be permitted to pursue his own conception of good life. Greeks try to identify what is good life and forced every individual to follow it. Like our Sanatana Dharma today. We are trying to identify Sanatana Dharma and force everyone to follow it. But Greeks, that was the idea of Greeks. But modern idea, every individual has this ability to identify his own conception of good. No one should interfere. Individual knows what is good and he will try to realize it. You only create conditions for the individual to realize the good. You don't tell him what a good life is. You don't tell what a good life is to the individual. Let the individual decide what is good to him and accordingly realize. This is the idea that has come in the modern thinking, liberal thinking, right? And contemporary, because this idea of liberalism did not help in the downtrodden in the society. This is where you find feminism. This is where you find post-colonialism. Feminism, post-colonialism, because this idea of individuality did not translate into the emancipation of women. So in the third phase, contemporary thought is engaged in the emancipation of the underprivileged. So Dalit emancipation, women emancipation, black emancipation. So post 1960, the thought is identified in terms of emancipation of societies, emancipation of particular section of people. This is how the Western thought progressed from Greek to the present. Started with promoting a qualitatively good life, then shifted to individual, identifying what is good. So good is not something dictated, but good is something to be realized by each and every individual on their own terms. No one to interfere. Then in the contemporary, this idea of good is only limited to the elite in society. The majority of the people are not able to overcome or realize their own self. So it focused in terms of community emancipation. This is where you find the interpretative theories trying to promote the emancipation of the underprivileged societies, identified as subaltern. Subalterns in society. Subalterns means the underprivileged in the societies. Got it? This is how the section A deals with. And section B is purely India-centric, Indian government and politics. How these concepts are introduced into India. Because India, as I said, during the freedom struggle movement, we tried to create our own renaissance, Indian renaissance. So we did not follow the Western renaissance, because Western renaissance resulted in industrial production. Western renaissance resulted in the rise of capitalism. Capitalism means industrialization. But India continued to be an agrarian society. Feudalism. Agrarian societies are identified with feudalism. Industrially advanced societies with capitalism. So, Indian government and politics begins with this, because when you look at justice, we are not a just social order. We are a hierarchical society. We have caste hierarchies, we have gender differences, we have religious differences. So how to arrive at social justice? So we relied not in the state, but in the constitution. So our constitution should help in realization of social justice. That is the reason why we have preamble, identifying certain ideals. And one of the important ideals that the preamble highlights is justice, socio-economic and political. So this has to be realized in society through the constitution. Right? So Indian government and politics are guided by the constitution. And that's the reason why the other day even Prime Minister Narendra Modi, before taking the swearing in, he tried to offer his respects to the Indian constitution. But it's a different thing. Next day I found an article in Hindu written by Dushyant Dave, who was former Bar Council President, Supreme Court. He argues that it's only optics. Optics means dikhava. He is not in true spirit trying to follow the constitution. So he highlighted where he went against the constitution even after his third election. Even after this third election, he tried to highlight, because he made a unilateral announcement of appointing the NSA, extending the term of NSA Ajit Doval. He said this is not the power of the Prime Minister, it is the power of the cabinet, which is not constituted. So he has violated the spirit of the constitution. That was the intent of the article, right? So Indian government and politics are to follow in true letter and spirit the constitution, right? So the elections that we witnessed were centered around this idea of constitution, because the opposition claimed that if Modi third term is successful, he will change the constitution. Got it? So that the elections were fought surprisingly around the idea of constitution. You understand? So we find something new happening in the Indian context, where we try to establish or re-establish the constitution, because if you ignore the constitution, we are paving way for an authoritarian state. So Indian government in politics, part B. Through the constitution, all these concepts have to be realized, starting from justice, equality, rights, our authority, and legitimacy. Similarly, when you look at paper 2, again we have two parts, section A and section B. And in paper 2, first 4 topics deal with comparative politics. It is not comparative government, remember. It is comparative politics. So what is the difference between government and politics? Comparative government means where you make a comparison between American government and Indian government. Probably we can make a comparison in terms of the institutions. Say we can say American government is a presidential form of government, Indian government is a parliamentary form of government. But when you say comparative politics, it includes a comparative study of both state and society together. It includes a comparative study of both state and society together. So it is not just a comparison of the state. It is also a comparison of the levels of development of society. How mature we are politically when in relation to American society. Are we mature? Did we develop our political consciousness? Did we develop our political culture to participate in the election process? So what is the level of participation that the people have? What is the level of consciousness people have with respect to the political system? So here we make a comparison in terms of the participation of people. So when the more the people participate, for example, a healthy political culture is identified with really participating public political culture. So participating means where people not only provide inputs to the state to make a decision, but they also stand beneficiaries of the decision of the state. Right? Because what politics does is, whatever inputs it gets, it transforms them into outputs. Transforms means because it has the authority to transform, it has the authority to make a decision. For example, take a policy. Whatever inputs the state receives from society, it authoritatively makes a decision to transform these inputs into outputs. Are the people making the inputs? And are the people stand benefited by the output? This is where the political culture is determined. Did the people ask Ram Temple? Did the people ask Uniform Civil Code? Did the people ask abrogating Article 370? If the people ask, then it is a participant political culture. If the people do not ask, but the state makes a decision on behalf of the people, then it becomes subject political culture. That means it is not a political culture which is well developed. A well developed political culture is a political culture where people make the choice. People make choice on the system. People make choice on the pressure on the government to make a decision. Is the government making decisions because of the people's participation, where people demand the decision, or government makes the decision on behalf of the people? If the government is making decisions on behalf of the people, then we are not a well-developed political culture. So when we make a comparison with American political culture in comparative politics, we study the societal developments. To what extent the societies have developed to promote participant political culture. Are we part of a participant political culture, or are we part of a subjective political culture? Or are we part of a parochial? Parochial means neither we are at the input level nor at the output level. Both, if the state maintains at the input and output level, it is parochial. 1 second. If you come only if you are not participant to input, but if you stand benefited in the output, subject political culture. But if you are actively participating in input as well as output, participant political culture. Yes. Correct? Yes. But do the MLAs ask you when they make a decision in the parliament? MPs ask you when they make a decision in the parliament? Correct kada? See, political, andukorke correct question adino. What is the objective of politics? Political life lo manakunne రెండే. ఒకటి లిబరల్ ఐడియా చూసినప్పుడు రికన్సిలియేషన్. స్టేట్ ఏం చేస్తుంది? రికన్సిలియేషన్ చేస్తుంది. ఇంకా డిస్ప్యూట్స్ వచ్చినప్పుడు రిజాల్వ్ చేయాలి. రెండోది మొబిలైజేషన్. సో మనకు జరుగుతుంది మొబిలైజేషన్. అదే చెప్తున్నా, పార్టిసిపేట్ పొలిటికల్ కల్చర్ కాదు. స్టేట్ మొబిలైజ్ చేస్తుంది సపోర్ట్ని, పబ్లిక్ సపోర్ట్ని. ఇవాళ చంద్రబాబు నాయుడు ఏం చెప్పి గెలిచిండు? షణ్ముఖ ఏదో పెట్టిండు. షణ్ముఖ అంటే సిక్స్ గ్యారంటీస్ ఏమో ఇచ్చిండు. అంటే ప్రజలు అడగలేదు, అది ప్రజలు అడగలే. నువ్వేం చేస్తున్నావు అంటే యు ఆర్ ట్రయింగ్ టు మొబిలైజ్ పాపులర్ సపోర్ట్ బేస్డ్ ఆన్ దిస్ ఐడియాస్. అర్థమైందా? సో టుమారో ఇఫ్ చంద్రబాబు నాయుడు కమ్స్ అప్ విత్ అనదర్ బ్రిలియంట్ ఐడియా, people may appreciate or people may not appreciate. If they appreciate, they may vote him again. If they don't appreciate, they will not vote for him. అంటే ఇదేమవుతుంది? మొబిలైజేషన్ అవుతుంది, రికన్సిలియేషన్ లేదు ఎక్కడ. పొలిటికల్ కల్చర్ వాట్ వీఆర్ ప్రమోటింగ్ ఇన్ ఇండియా ఈజ్ నాట్ ఏ రికన్సైలింగ్ పొలిటికల్ కల్చర్. A political culture that we are promoting in India is a mobilizational political culture. రథయాత్ర తీసుకొని వచ్చారు బీజేపీ. ఎందుకోసం తెచ్చారు? త్రూ రథయాత్ర దే ట్రై టు క్రియేట్ ఏ మొబిలైజేషన్ విత్ రెస్పెక్ట్ టు రామ్ టెంపుల్. సో ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ సంథింగ్ హ్యాపెండ్ యాజ్ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఎనీ రికన్సిలియేషన్. ఇట్ ఈస్ మొబిలైజేషనల్. సో పొలిటికల్ కల్చర్ అనేది ఏముంది? మొబిలైజేషనల్ ఉంది. వాళ్ళు ఇస్తున్నారు ప్రామిస్లు, మనం అడగట్లేదు. రికన్సిలేషన్ ఎప్పుడు ఉంటుంది? నువ్వు అడిగినప్పుడు. నేను ఒకటి అడుగుతున్నా, నువ్వు ఒకటి అడుగుతున్నావు. స్టేట్ అప్పుడు న్యూట్రల్ ఆర్బిటర్గా రికన్సైల్ చేస్తే అది రికన్సిలియేషన్. నువ్వు అడగట్లేదు, నేను అడగట్లేదు. స్టేటే మొబిలైజ్ చేస్తుంది, రైట్? దాన్ని మొబిలైజేషనల్ అంటారు. సో మన దగ్గర ఉన్న పొలిటికల్ కల్చర్ ఏంది? రికన్సిలేషనల్ కాదు, మొబిలైజేషనల్. అందుకొరకు ఏం చేస్తారంటే ప్రతి పొలిటికల్ పార్టీ కూడా ఏదో ఒక ఫ్రీబీ ఆఫర్ చేస్తున్నారు. ల్యాప్టాప్లు ఫ్రీగా ఇస్తాము, స్కూటీలు ఫ్రీగా ఇస్తాము, మిక్సర్లు ఇస్తాము, ఇవన్నీ దానికి ఫ్రీ బస్ రైడ్ ఇస్తాము. ఇవన్నీ ఏది? మొబిలైజేషనల్ పొలిటికల్ కల్చర్. అండర్స్టాండ్? ఇదే పబ్లిక్ లైఫ్లో ఉంటాయి, ఇంతకన్నా ఎక్కువేముంటుంది? ఉంటే రికన్సిలేషన్, నీ కోడ్ నా కోడ్ గొడవ ఉంటే, లేకపోతే మొబిలైజేషన్. అంతే కదా? సో కంపారిటివ్ పాలిటిక్స్ we try to study this aspect, the relationship between state and society in America, Europe, and in post-colonial states. What is the level of societal development? What is the level of state development in different societies is part of comparative politics. Paper 2 section A also has international politics. As part of international politics, there are some theories, again, same theories, liberal theories. Liberal theories identified as idealism there. So idealism believes that there is cooperation among the states internationally. And to counter this, we have realism, which argues states will never cooperate because every state will try to maximize its interest. If every state is trying to maximize its own interest, it will only result in conflict, not cooperation. But idealism believes states will cooperate. Realism argues states will never cooperate. So realism is based on the premise that there is anarchy in international system. Anarchy means lawlessness in international system. Might is right. Whoever has power, they will realize their interest. So America has power, it will realize its interest. Russia has power, it will realize its interest. China has power, so it will realize its interest. India has power, so it will realize its interest within our neighborhood. This is the argument, justified by the realist, because that's the reason why realism argues that there is Cold War. Why there is Cold War? Because there is no cooperation among the states. Because there is no law governing international politics. Every state is independent. So every state will try to maximize its interest. If every state is trying to maximize its interest, it will result in competition. Competition results to conflict. Where there is competition, it results into conflict. And there is no neutral arbiter internationally to resolve the conflict. So what the states have to do? They have to be dependent on self-help system. Self-help means you accumulate more and more war material. Self-help. Accumulate more war material. Because in international politics, there is no one to help you. Self-help. Self-help means you be prepared for conflict all the time. This is what the strategy what we follow today. That's the reason why we are focusing more money on modernizing defense. Defense modernization is nothing but self-help system. Because India is not a country in the world today, like other P5 countries, which produce its own security. We don't produce our own security. We are dependent on others. That's the reason why we are borrowing, again, the Rafale. Why are we procuring Rafale? Because we don't produce our own security. So we constantly assume that we are at a threat situation. Perpetual threat. So to overcome this, self-help. Develop your own war material. So import Rafale, import S-400, S-500 defense system from Russia. Right? Prepare yourself for conflict. This is realism. But idealism argues, no, there is cooperation among states. That's the reason we have United Nations to help resolve the conflict. Idealism. Idealism believes that we have United Nations to resolve the conflict. So states are not at war. But realism, no. There is no cooperation but conflict. Marxism, they try to internationalize class struggle into global context and argue that there is a class war going on between property house or property owners are identified with the global north and propertyless the global south. Poor countries are identified as part of the global south. So they try to identify a class war, the global phenomena between the industrially advanced north versus the deprived South, North-South conflict, Marxism, international politics. Got it? So we also have social constructivism. Constructivism argues that what we think that anarchy prevails. Anarchy does not exist. Anarchy is a human mind. Anarchy is a creation of human mind. Anarchy in international politics does not exist. What we think anarchy is something that we create. We assume that there is anarchy in international relations. So accordingly, we make the move towards overcoming anarchy. This is social constructivism. Social constructivism has its origin in Kant, Immanuel Kant. Kant argued that nature does not have any order. బయట ఏదైతే చూస్తున్నామో ప్రపంచము నేచర్లో గ్రీన్ అని నువ్వు చూస్తున్నావు. నేచర్ డస్ నాట్ హ్యావ్ ఎనీ ఆర్డర్. వాట్ ఎవర్ యూ ఫైండ్ ఇన్ నేచర్ ఇస్ ద క్రియేషన్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమన్ మైండ్. If human mind thinks there is order in nature, you will find order. If human mind thinks there is greenery in nature, you will find green. Otherwise, nature does not have anything. Everything is a product of human mind, creation of human mind. That is how it identifies. So anarchy means anarchy really does not exist. But your mind thinks that there is anarchy in international politics. So accordingly, you try to make a move. Got it? Social constructivism. So idealism and realism in international politics can be explained in two terms. Realism argues that there is logic of consequence. Every state will act based on pros and cons. What is advantage, what is disadvantage. So if it is advantage, I will act. If it is not an advantage, I will not act. This is how realism believes. But idealism argues there is not logic of consequence, but logic of appropriateness. Why a particular state acts in a particular way? Because it thinks it is appropriate. Why every state adopted globalization? Why every state adopted globalization in 1990? Because they thought it appropriate. Nobody made any pros and cons calculations, advantage or disadvantage. Blindly, almost 3/4 of the world adopted globalization. This is what idealism argues, logic of appropriateness. So they thought that it helps everyone. So everyone followed. Nobody made any calculations, whether it is advantage or disadvantage. Now, those who championed globalization, they are trying to withdraw from globalization, deglobalization process, like Brexit. Next, America. Because America is no longer gaining from globalization. So America is opposed to globalization. That's the reason why Trump gave that call. America first. America first campaign is advanced by Trump. So globalization is something that is promoted aggressively by China only today. Not by America or not by Europe. There are only few actors in the globe who support globalization. After China, India is one. Because India also benefited by globalization. But not every country in the world is in favor of globalization. And that is the reason why, to promote globalization, America created World Trade Center, World Trade Organization. Today, globalization is not advantage to America. So it is trying to destroy this institution, WTO. Got it? This is what you try to understand in international politics. So in international politics, we try to identify what is the role of India in terms of global governance. As part of global governance, we have United Nations. So India is demanding a role in Security Council. We wanted a higher share in voting rights with respect to World Bank and IMF. So we wanted to introduce reforms into global governance. Global governance is undertaken by the institutions like WTO, United Nations, Security Council, World Bank and IMF in the present. So all along, India remained a rule taker. Today, we have the ambition to become a rule maker. All along international politics, India had been a rule taker. Today, we wanted to assume the role of rule shaper or rule maker. So international politics are drifting from America, Europe to Asia, where China and India are on the rise. Got it? This we understand in international politics. Comparative politics followed by international politics. And next comes India-centric, part B of paper 2. India-centric international politics. Mostly confined to the various policies that India has adopted. What is India's role in its neighborhood, South Asia? What is India's role in its neighborhood, South Asia? Because South Asia was non-existent prior to the formation of India. South Asia was non-existent prior to the formation of India. South Asia is created only after Indian independence. Otherwise, it was identified as East Asia. Only with India's independence, we had these countries which were part of the British provinces, part of British India. All South Asian countries were part of British India. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, they are all part of British India. South Asia is something that is created post Indian independence. And India considered itself to be, South Asia to be home of India. So we never wanted any external interference into South Asia. So our policy, foreign policy was limited to prevent any external interference into South Asian neighborhood. For almost 4 decades, this was Indian foreign policy. Starting from Nehru to Rajiv Gandhi. 4 decades, Indian foreign policy was limited to South Asia or neighborhood. Only after India introduced globalization, starting from P.V. Narasimha Rao, we started moving beyond Asia, South Asia, into neighboring East Asia under Look East policy. P.V. Narasimha Rao was instrumental in moving beyond South Asia under Look East policy. Similarly, P.V. Narasimha Rao was also instrumental in connecting towards Central Asia under Look North policy, because Central Asia was also gained independence after the end of Cold War with the disintegration of Soviet Union post 1989. So India started looking towards Central Asia under Look North policy and started looking beyond South Asia under Look East policy. Look East policy was also because of the Kuwait War. India was looking for alternate source of hydrocarbons away from West Asia. But with Gujarat has identified Indian foreign policy in terms of extended neighborhood. So Gujarat doctrine is identified in 2: neighborhood policy and extended neighborhood policy. Under neighborhood and extended neighborhood, Gujarat in fact projected India into the maritime domain, which was not the case. So the extended neighborhood included Africa, maritime Africa, stretching up to beyond Malacca Straits towards Japan. So India's extended neighborhood perception developed only under Gujarat Doctrine. Otherwise, we remained confined to this continental neighborhood, where land connectivity was existed. Only with Gujarat Doctrine, we not only identified neighborhood, but went beyond neighborhood, extended neighborhood policy, which also included the maritime neighborhood, stretching up to Africa. This has become India's neighborhood. So we made a foray into the maritime domain only with Gujarat. And that is something that continued in Vajpayee through this tricontinental alliance in the formation of IPSA. India, Brazil, South Africa, tricontinental alliance. Vajpayee was instrumental in promoting IPSA because Gujarat provided us with extended neighborhood, connecting Africa. So the next step is in terms of the formation of IPSA. Post to 2004, because of these two wars, American war on Afghanistan and American war on Iraq, we find a declining America. Because America has created an architecture after the end of Second World War. America has created an architecture after the end of Second World War, which is easy to join but difficult to overturn. Any new country can easily join, but difficult to overturn. But for the first time, we saw a shift from Asia, particularly China, taking the lead to develop an alternate architecture. After 2008 global financial crisis, the formation of BRICS. After 2008 global financial crisis, the formation of BRICS, China took the lead to develop an alternate architecture based on Asia, not based on Europe. Because America has created an architecture which is easy to join but difficult to overturn. It has created global institutions in United Nations, World Bank, IMF, WTO. Easy to join but difficult to overturn. So China, it wanted to replace America, has mooted this idea of developing an alternate in BRICS. But subsequently, BRICS aligned with the global architecture. Initially, BRICS was assumed to be an alternate. BRICS was assumed to be an alternate to the American architecture, but subsequently it aligned with the global architecture. So what we find in terms of India is trying to align with China in containing America through BRICS. And it is aligning with America to contain China under Quad. India is trying to align with China to contain America under BRICS. So through BRICS platform, they wanted to democratize the global institutions of governance. Democratize the global institutions of governance like United Nations Security Council, World Bank, IMF, and WTO. And through American Quad, we wanted to contain China. So this is where you find India's pragmatism in foreign policy. Right? Neither we are with America, nor we are with China. So according to the need, we make our foreign policy decision based on merit. Right? We don't mind joining China, demanding reforming the global architecture controlled by the Americans. And we are at the same time we are part of America to contain China under Quad. Clear? So India-centric is part B. So with India-centric, mostly we find the conflict not with America but with China. India tried to prevent external interference into South Asian neighborhood up to Rajiv Gandhi. And that is the reason why we find Indira Gandhi's intervention into Sikkim, annexation of Sikkim into India. Indira Gandhi's intervention into Pakistan and splitting Pakistan into Pakistan and Bangladesh. We did not prevent any external interference. Even Rajiv Gandhi's interference into Maldives. But post assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, India stayed away in terms of interference. Probably the reason is we had a weak executive at the union level because of coalition politics. From 1989 to 2014, we had a weak prime minister at the center because of coalition politics. Clear? So what we find is a weak prime minister resulting in interference from outside. Norway mediated in Sri Lankan crisis, which was not the case in the past. Norway mediated to resolve the Sri Lankan crisis. It mediated between the LTTE and Sri Lankan government, which was not the case in the past. And this subsequently resulted in the expanding footprint of China within South Asian neighborhood. Subsequently, it resulted in the expanding footprint of China in the South Asian neighborhood. Today, South Asian neighbors are no longer comfort only with India. Right? They are trying to deal simultaneously with India and China. So South Asia is no longer the domain that belongs to India. Now we are struggling to retain our control over South Asia. So in this context, we find India's Act East policy. And one of the pillars of Act East policy is to contain China. One of the pillars of Act East policy is to contain China. Clear? So this is the brief gist, I can say, of the paper. So the paper is not very cumbersome. The paper is not very complex. You have to understand the paper from the commonsensical point of view. You are not doing any academic research because you have to assimilate and use it according to your common sense. So when you look at the questions that appeared in the previous years, probably that makes more sense. So if you are serious about taking this paper, I advise, please buy that book, the previous year's question paper. Topic wise, they were sorted and kept. What question has appeared in which year? So that when we deal with the class, it would remain handy for you to understand what is question that is asked in that year. What was asked in 2023? What was asked in 2022? What sort of questions appeared in 21, 20, 19? If you have that question bank in your hand, the option is left to you. You will get both, only questions, and you also get question and answer. But I don't go with that answer because some of the answers are ridiculous. They are not up to the standard of UPSC. But for your convenience, you can choose both. Right? So buy that, and that should be in your hand every day. And one more request. When we begin the class, I want you to interrupt me again and again. Because if you don't interrupt, I go in a flow and I think that you understood. So wherever you find even a smallest of doubts, please ask. Interrupt. It should be more discussion, not teaching. More the questions, more you go with satisfaction. Less questions, probably you might not be attentive in the class. How do I know? Your face is not an index where I can read whether you followed, not followed. I don't know. So if you ask question, then I can sense whether you did understand or not. Clear? Have any questions? Please ask. Public administration la bureaucracy maatrame avutaru. The effect of bureaucratic intervention. PSIR lo asalu state enduku vachindi? Implementation ఒకటే అవుతున్నారు. ఇక్కడ ఎందుకు వచ్చింది? రిలేషన్షిప్ ఏంది ఇండివిజువల్? పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్లో సర్వీస్ డెలివరీ ఒకటే ఉంటుంది, గవర్నెన్స్ ఒకటే ఉంటుంది. అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్ అంటేనే సర్వీస్. సర్వీస్ లేకపోతే నీకు అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్ తోటి పని ఏంది? రైట్? ఇక్కడికి వచ్చేసరికి మనకు అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్ కాదు, స్టేట్ ఎందుకు వచ్చింది? ఇండివిజువల్కి అసలుకి ఇండివిజువల్ ఈ లెవెల్కి ఎట్లా వచ్చాడు? నీకున్న రైట్స్ ఏంది? ఆ రైట్స్ నువ్వు ఎందుకు వినియోగించుకోలేకపోతున్నావు? ఇది నువ్వు అర్థం చేసుకుంటావు. అందుకొరకు క్వశ్చన్ చూస్తే తెలుస్తుంది. జస్టిస్ అంటే వాడు జస్టిస్ అడగలే. కంపేర్ మోడర్న్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్ విత్ గ్రీక్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్ అని అడిగింది. కామన్ సెన్స్కి లేదో నువ్వు రీసెర్చ్ చేసి రాయవు. అది గ్రీక్స్ ఏమనుకున్నారు జస్టిస్ని? మోడర్న్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్ అంటే ఏంది? మోడర్న్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్ అంటే ఏం చెప్పినాం? ఫేర్నెస్. గ్రీక్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్ ఏంది? హార్మోనీ విత్ నేచర్. వాడు ఎథికల్ వే ఆఫ్ లైఫ్ అన్నాడు. ఎథికల్ వే ఆఫ్ లైఫ్ అన్నప్పుడు వాడు ఏం చూస్తున్నాడు గ్రీక్లో? బికాస్ గ్రీక్ థాట్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఈజ్ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ నేచర్. సొసైటీస్ ఆర్ న్యాచురల్, స్టేట్ ఈజ్ న్యాచురల్, హ్యూమన్స్ ఆర్ న్యాచురల్. అన్ని నేచర్లో భాగమైనప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది? If you want to maintain peace, you need to maintain harmony with nature. కానీ హాప్కి వచ్చేసరికి మారిపోయింది. నేచర్ గానే కాదు అన్నాడు. నథింగ్ ఈజ్ నథింగ్ ఈజ్ గివెన్, ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఈజ్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్. సొసైటీ అంటే వీ మేడ్, హ్యూమన్స్ మేడ్ సొసైటీ. స్టేట్ అంటే హ్యూమన్స్ మేడ్ స్టేట్. సో మనం చేసుకున్నప్పుడు ఒకటి నచ్చకపోతే ఇంకో సొసైటీ ఏర్పరచుకుంటాం. If you are not happy with one state, we will create one more state. If you are not happy with one society, we will create one more society. If nothing is given, everything is man-made ante artificial antam. So nothing is natural, everything is artificial. Artificial అయినప్పుడు హ్యూమన్స్ ఇంపార్టెంట్. వాళ్ళ ఇష్టం, ఇండివిజువల్ సిస్టమ్, వాళ్ళకి కావాల్సిన సొసైటీ వాడు ఏర్పరచుకుంటాడు. నథింగ్ ఈజ్ గివెన్. ఏది కూడా పర్మనెంట్ కాదు, అన్ని కూడా మారేటివే. సో మారినప్పుడు హ్యూమన్స్ ఎట్లా కావాలంటే అట్లా సమాజాన్ని మార్చుకుంటారు. ఒకే విధంగా లైఫ్ ఉండాలని ఏముంది? మల్టిపుల్ లైఫ్స్ని ఐడెంటిఫై చేస్తారు, మల్టిపుల్ లైఫ్స్ని లీడ్ చేసే ప్రయత్నం చేస్తారు. ఇది మేజర్ బ్రేక్ మనకు క్లాసికల్ జస్టిస్కి మోడర్న్ జస్టిస్కి. క్లాసికల్ జస్టిస్లో నీకు హార్మోనీ విత్ నేచర్, అది తప్పితే నువ్వు ఖయాస్లో ఉంటావు, క్రైసిస్లో ఉంటావు అని. ఎందుకంటే ఎవ్రీథింగ్ న్యాచురల్. మోడర్న్కి వచ్చేది న్యాచురల్ లేనే లేదు, ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఆర్టిఫిషియల్, ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఇస్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్. ఒకటి నచ్చకపోతే ఇంకోటి చేస్తాం. ఈ ఇన్స్పిరేషన్ ఎక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చింది? న్యాచురల్ కాదు ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ అనేది కోపర్నికస్కి వెళ్ళి వచ్చింది. కోపర్నికస్ చెప్పిండు జియోసెంట్రిక్ కాదు హీలియోసెంట్రిక్ అని. అప్పటిదాకా మనం ఏమనుకున్నాం? కోపర్నికస్ వచ్చే వరకు మన చుట్టూ అన్నీ తిరుగుతున్నాయి. నేను కోపర్నికస్ చెప్పిండు మన చుట్టూ కాదు, మనమే సూర్యుని చుట్టూ తిరుగుతున్నాం అని చెప్పి. ఆ ఐడియా నుంచి ఇన్స్పిరేషన్ తీసుకొని వచ్చింది నథింగ్ ఈజ్ న్యాచురల్, ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఇస్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్ అని వచ్చింది, ఆర్టిఫిషియల్. ఇంకొక మేజర్ చేంజ్ ఎక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చింది పాస్ట్ అంటే, ఏన్షియంట్ గ్రీక్లో హార్మోని ఎందుకు పోయిందంటే వాళ్ళకు నేచర్లో ఏది చూసినా వస్తుంది పోతుంది. చెట్లు వస్తున్నాయి, డికే అవుతున్నాయి, పోతున్నాయి. మనుషులు పుడుతున్నారు, ముసలోళ్ళు అవుతున్నారు, వస్తున్నారు. ఏది పర్మనెంట్ లేదు. ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఈజ్ కన్ఫైన్డ్ టు దట్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ డికే. ప్రతిదీ గ్రో అవుతుంది, డికే అవుతుంది. దీన్ని ఎట్లా ఆపాలనేదే వాళ్ళ ప్రయత్నం. సొసైటీస్ కూడా అంతే, గ్రో అవుతున్నాయి, డికే అవుతున్నాయి, పర్వర్షన్ వస్తుంది. దీన్ని ఎట్లా ఆపాలనే చూశాను. కానీ సొసైటీస్ ప్రోగ్రెస్ అవుతున్న ఐడియా వాళ్ళకి లేదు. హిస్టరీలో ఒక సమాజం ఒక స్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ హిస్టారికల్ డెవలప్మెంట్కి వెళ్ళి ఇంకో స్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ హిస్టారికల్ డెవలప్మెంట్కి మనం ముందుకు పోతున్నాం అనే ఐడియా వాళ్ళకి లేదు. గ్రీక్లో గ్రోత్ అండ్ డికేకే ఏది వచ్చినా అది మనకు హిందూ దాంట్లో కూడా ఉంది, డీజనరేషన్ ఆఫ్ టైం. అందుకొరకే మనం ఏమంటాం, కృతాయుగం, త్రేతాయుగం, ద్వాపర యుగం, కలియుగంకి వెళ్ళి మళ్ళీ నువ్వు కృతాయుగం పోతావని చెప్తున్నారు. డీజనరేషన్ ఆఫ్ టైం అంటే నీకు కృతాయుగంలో 100% ధర్మం ఉంటే త్రేతాయుగానికి వస్తే 75, ద్వాపరానికి 50, కలియుగానికి 25 వచ్చిన తర్వాత మళ్ళీ ఎక్కడ పోతున్నావు? ముందు కాదు, యు ఆర్ గోయింగ్ బ్యాక్. ఇదే ఐడియా గ్రీక్స్లో ఉంది. సైక్లికల్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ డికే మోడల్. దీన్ని బ్రేక్ చేసిందే మోడర్న్ ఐడియా. ఇది సైక్లికల్ కాదు, ఇది లీనియర్ ప్రోగ్రెస్. వీఆర్ మూవింగ్ ఫ్రమ్ వన్ స్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ హిస్టారికల్ డెవలప్మెంట్ టు అనదర్ స్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ హిస్టారికల్ డెవలప్మెంట్. కనుక మనకు నచ్చినట్లు మనం ఉంటాం. హార్మోని అనేది అవసరం లేదు. నేచర్ని మనం కంట్రోల్ చేస్తున్నాం కదా, అప్పటిదాకా నేచర్ మనం కంట్రోల్ చేసింది కనుక హార్మోని ఉండే. ఇవాళ కనీసం నేచర్ని మనం ప్రతిఘటించకపోయినా ఎప్పుడు సైక్లోన్ వస్తే తెలుసు. సో నేచర్ని సేఫ్గా మనం దట్టుకోగలుగుతున్నాం కదా, అది ముందు లేకుండే. వివర్ పాన్స్ ఆఫ్ ది నేచర్. ఇప్పుడు వీఆర్ కంట్రోలింగ్ ద నేచర్. సో మనం నేచర్ని కంట్రోల్ చేసుకున్నప్పుడు ఈ ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ సోషల్ లైఫ్ని కంట్రోల్ చేసుకోలేమా? ఆ ఐడియా నుంచి వచ్చిందే మ్యాన్ మేడ్. దీన్నే సోషల్ కాంట్రాక్ట్ అంట, రైట్? సో గ్రీక్ థాట్ ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్లో హార్మోనీ విత్ నేచర్. ఎందుకంటే వాడు భయపడ్డాడు, నేచర్ అనేది మిస్టరీ, నేచర్ తెలియదు కనుక హార్మోనీ పెట్టుకుంటే బెస్ట్. మోడర్న్ మ్యాన్కి వచ్చేసరికి వీ స్టార్టెడ్ కంట్రోలింగ్ ది నేచర్. కనుక మనం ఏమంటున్నాం, ఎవ్రీథింగ్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్. సొసైటీ ఈజ్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్, స్టేట్ ఈజ్ మ్యాన్ మేడ్. ఒకటి నచ్చకపోతే ఇంకోటి. ఫ్యామిలీ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో నాట్ న్యాచురల్ బట్ ఆర్టిఫిషియల్. విడిపోతాం, ఇంకో ఫ్యామిలీ పెట్టుకుంటాం. అంతేగా న్యాచురల్గా అదే ఫ్యామిలీలో ఉండాలనే అవసరం లేదనేది తీసుకొని వచ్చింది. ఇంకా మీకు అర్థం కావాలంటే సొసైటీ ఎట్లా క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంటే ఫ్యామిలీ, ఈవెన్ ఫ్యామిలీ ఈజ్ నాట్ కన్సిడర్డ్ న్యాచురల్, ఆర్టిఫిషియల్. క్లియర్? ఫాలోడ్? హ్యావ్ ఎనీ క్వశ్చన్స్? ఎనీవన్ ఎల్స్? ఆన్సర్ వచ్చిందా నీ క్వశ్చన్కి? బాగా అడిగితేనే మీ క్లారిటీ ఉంటుంది, నాకు బోర్ కొట్టకుండా ఉంటుంది. ఓకే, మీరు క్లాస్లో జాయిన్ అయితే క్లాస్ అయిన తర్వాత ఏం చేస్తా అంటే హ్యాండ్అవుట్స్ ఇస్తా, ఏ టాపిక్ ఆ టాపిక్. చదువుకోండి, డస్ట్బిన్లోనే వేసుకోండి. ఇచ్చే బాధ్యత అయితే నాది, నా పని చేస్తాను. జనరల్గా నేను ఇయ్య నోట్స్ రాసుకోమంట, కానీ ఇయర్కి వెళ్ళి మారుతాం, హ్యాండ్అవుట్స్ ఇస్తాం. డౌట్ ఉన్నప్పుడు అడగండి. నో క్వశ్చన్స్. థ్యాంక్ యూ.